We're going back to the main thing. In the midst of coming back from summer, some of you are new to Korea, some of you have grown up in the church, others of you are new to church. We're going back to the main thing. What is Christianity all about? And many of you will know what I'll be talking about, but my hope is that if you are a believer, that it would strengthen your faith. If you're an unbeliever, if you're a young believer, it would move you towards faith. And that's the hope for today. Open up your Bibles to Matthew 4. Matthew 4, if you don't have a Bible, I think we have Bibles located over there in the back for you. If you don't have a Bible, it's our gift to you. You can take it home, and that can be your physical Bible that you read and meet the Lord in. But Matthew 4:18, and today we'll be talking about several different points in Scripture where you see Jesus telling his disciples or future disciples, follow me. And basically we want to take those snapshots and try to understand, what does it mean to follow Jesus? What does it really look like? What is he asking for when he says this? Matthew 4:18, we'll look at the first statement that he says, follow me. We'll look at the last statement that he says, which is also actually follow me, and a couple of instances in between. Matthew 4:18, this is shortly after John the Baptist gets baptized, Jesus gets baptized and starts public ministry. Shortly after that, he calls his disciples. He calls those who will become his disciples, and that's the first snapshot that we look into. Matthew 4:18, while walking by the Sea of Galilee, he saw two brothers, Simon, who is called Peter, and Andrew his brother, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. And he said to them, follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. Immediately they left their nets and followed him. And going on from there, he saw two other brothers, John, the son of Zebedee, and John his brother. James, the son of Zebedee, and John his brother, in the boat with Zebedee, their father, mending their nets. He called them. Again, immediately they left the boat and their father and followed him. The first thing that we'll see in terms of what it means to follow Jesus is to literally walk after Christ. Walk after Christ. If you have your bulletin, that'll be your first point. To walk after Christ. Christianity is a pursuit after Christ. To walk after him. Tell your neighbor, walk after Christ. If you're new to our church, that's what we do. It gives you a chance to engage. A walk after Christ. Christianity is a pursuit after Christ. What Jesus is doing, it's like the game Follow the Leader. What he's actually saying is, follow me physically. Follow me. So he walks away and they literally leave everything and they follow him. It's like the game Follow the Leader. That's what you do. Pursue after me. It's a pursuit after Christ. But as I say this, I want you to know who is saying this. It matters who says it. That Jesus, who is God, is saying this. It matters who says it. If I was to ask you, hey, tomorrow you guys want to hang out? Let's grab some food and explore Seoul. Some of you will be like, sure. Others of you, once a week is enough on Sundays, right? It matters who says it. If Ryan Gosling walks in through the door, that's not Ryan Gosling. If Ryan Gosling walks in through the door, right? Many of you know him. He is the meme, is what I call him. He's like what all memes are created after. It's because Ryan Gosling. If he says, hey, tomorrow, let's go out, check out Seoul, grab a couple of meals. Half of you, if not all of you, would be like, sure. Why? Because it matters who says it. When Jesus says, follow me, it matters who is saying it. It's not me that says it. It's not a noble person that's saying it. It's not a good person that's saying it. It's God incarnate saying, follow me. In the custom back in the day, students disciples would actually go to rabbis, and they would say, "Can I learn from you?" And what Jesus is doing is flipping the paradigm. He's saying, you don't actually choose me, I choose you. I have all authority. And so when Jesus says, "Follow me," what he's actually saying is not just an invitation, "Hey, you interested in following me?" It's a command. And so these men who don't really know Jesus, but they know a little bit about him, they know enough about him that they immediately leave everything. That's the pattern. They immediately leave everything. The little they know about him, they think he's worth it. He's worth it to follow. That's what Christianity is all about. It's not a service that you attend. It's not about doing the right thing. It's not about associating with a certain political party. That is not what it's all about. It's about knowing Jesus, God incarnate, and him calling you. Not just inviting you, calling you, "Follow me." That's what Christianity is all about. It matters who said it. You walk after Christ. It's the beginning of their faith, but it's also the end of their faith. John 21:19, you'll see it on the screen. It's the last thing that he says. The first thing that he tells Peter is, "Follow me, I'll make you fishers of men." The last thing that he says before he ascends into heaven, John 21:19, this he said to show by what kind of death he was to glorify God, telling Peter and others how they will potentially die. And he says, "And after saying this, he said to him, 'Follow me.'" It's the first thing that Jesus says. It's the last thing that Jesus says. That's what Christianity is all about. It's not about a service that you attend. It's not about which church you're a part of. It's not about a certain denomination. It's about who is Jesus to you. And are you following after him? Or are you trying to do what is right? Are you trying to do what everyone else tells you should do? Christianity is about following him. It is a relationship. You walk after Christ, but you also walk with Christ. Walk with Christ. Tell your neighbor, walk with Christ. You pursue Christ, but then you enjoy him. You walk after him, but then you also enjoy him. And I want you to see there's so many different places in the scriptures that you can see this. But I point out Matthew 9:9-13. And you'll see it here on the screen. Matthew 9:9-13. And this is what he calls Matthew now. We've seen him call Peter, Andrew, others. Now we see him call Matthew. Matthew 9:9. As Jesus passed on from there, he saw a man called Matthew sitting at the tax booth. And he said to him, "Follow me." And he arose and followed him. And as Jesus reclined at the table in the house, behold, many tax collectors and sinners came and were reclining with Jesus and his disciples. And when the Pharisees saw this, they said to his disciples, "Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?" But when he heard it, he said, "Those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. Go and learn what this means. I desire mercy and not sacrifice, for I came not to call the righteous, but the sinners." In Luke's account, what we also see is that when he calls Matthew, Matthew immediately leaves. But then it's Matthew that throws a party. Jesus calls Matthew. Matthew throws a party and invites others, other sinners, others who are marginalized, other tax collectors. So many tax collectors and sinners are there enjoying food, reclining. That's how they would eat. They would recline. It's this laid-back atmosphere. It's not Seoul, Korea. Right? Where it's go, 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 go. It's this moment when Jesus calls Matthew. Matthew is elated. Whoa, God, Jesus has called me. Throws a party for Jesus and for all of his friends, and it's there that they're reclining. This moment of pursuing after Christ turns into a moment of what? Enjoying him, delighting in him, knowing him. I imagine they would ask him questions. I imagine that they laughed. I imagine that it was a good time. I imagine that it was such a good time that Pharisees, these righteous religious people, looked at that scene and considered, how can Jesus, this reputable rabbi, eat with these sinners? It looked wrong because it looked like so much fun. They enjoyed each other. Jesus enjoyed them. And I imagine that these tax collectors and sinners enjoyed Jesus. I imagine that's why the religious people had such a hard time, because they saw these sinners being embraced. Christianity is about following Jesus. It's also about enjoying him. Do you enjoy him? When you think back about this week, is reading the Bible a duty? Is praying a duty? Or do you enjoy him? I grew up in the church, and with that came many struggles, questioning why do I really believe in God? And around end of my senior year, I was going through senior year high school. I was going through a lot of struggles. I was getting very angry at God. I found myself one Friday night driving home around midnight, just angry at God, kind of clenching my fist, asking him, God, why? And at that moment, I decided I still believe, but yet I don't want to follow. And so it led to about 2 years of rebellion. 2 years of me just kind of doing my thing. I still went to church here and there, but God wasn't really on my radar. Well, fast forward about 2 years, I had done what I had wanted and was really more miserable than ever. And I went to our church small group for the first time in maybe months. I just felt like that's what I needed. It was the last meeting before the semester ended. I was exhausted spiritually, emotionally. I just didn't care about things. And I was in small group, and they're all kind of looking at me like, who is this guy? Why is he here? I'm like, this is my small group. Back off. And then people start to share about, they're reflecting about the past semester. And usually, if you don't know what a Christian testimony is, in short, it's this. Life is hard, but God is good. That's basically it. Like, something happened to my family. It was so hard, but I realized God was good. That's basically it. School was so rough this semester, but I learned some lessons, and man, God is good. And literally, everyone's sharing that story. And as people are sharing that, something starts to stir in my heart. And I realized something. And so when it came to my turn to share, they asked, do you have anything to share about God or whatever this past semester? And so I shared this. I said, I miss him. I miss God. I didn't care about doing the right thing. I just missed him. What do I mean by that? I don't know what I mean by that. If you know him, you know what I mean, that God is real. It's not just you open up the Bible and you kind of know him, you cognitively assent, you agree. It's not that. It's for me, it was I would read the Bible and I would feel his presence. Even sometimes when I pray now, I feel his presence. I get like goosebumps. It's interesting. I can't describe it. Others of you know what I'm talking about. It's this sense that God is with you. It's not just mental knowledge. It's a spiritual reality. And it was his presence I was far from. I missed him because Christianity is about enjoying him. You show the world that he is worthy by how much you love him, by how much you enjoy him. You see, a Pharisee, they have no ability to show the world how beautiful God is. But if you know him, you have the ability to show the world how beautiful he is. You see, a Christian doesn't just find Jesus useful. A Christian finds Jesus beautiful, right? You don't just go to God because oh, I need this from him. I need him to help me with my finances or my future. I need a decision to make. And so you go to him in prayer. That's God being useful. But you go to him because you're hurting. You go to him because you want him. You go to him because you think he is the ultimate. You go to God because you don't just pursue after him like a goal. You pursue him as a person. And as you pursue him as a person, you enjoy him. You walk after Christ, but you walk with him. How do you know if you're in a relationship? Well, think about this past week. For many of us, we've grown up in the church, and so because of that, we just claim ourselves as Christian. And you may be. But ask yourself this week. Did you meet him? Do you enjoy him? If you didn't meet him, do you feel guilty or do you feel sad? I know when I can't see my kids, yes, I feel guilty, but I miss them. When I can't see my wife, sometimes I need it, right? Other times, I miss her. I don't feel guilty, I miss her. With God, do you miss him or do you feel guilty? If you feel guilty, chances are he is just God in the sky that you're trying to please by your works, but you have yet to find him beautiful. You said a Christian finds him beautiful because they understand what Jesus has done. Jesus knows you by name. He knows how many hairs are on your head. He knows the struggles that you have. He's entered into this world and he's entered into your life. When you know that, when you know his compassion, what happens to your heart? You stop doing the right thing and you pursue him because he's your ultimate. You enjoy him. Joseph Stoll says this. He's a pastor, author, professor. He says, if Christianity is dull and boring, if it's a burden and not a blessing, then most likely we are involved in a religion and not a relationship. And I get it in terms of reading the Bible is hard, which is why we have to study, which is why we have to read it, study with other people, because it's a book written over generations of time in a different culture. So it is hard to read. And even prayer is hard to do. It's the one thing that the disciples, they asked Jesus. They didn't ask Jesus, how do I preach or how do I heal? They asked Jesus, how do I pray? Because it's hard. But the question again is Christ worth it? Do you want to know him even more, even deeper? You pursue after Christ, but you pursue him and you walk with him. You enjoy him. You walk after Christ, you walk with Christ, and you walk in Christ's footsteps. You walk in his footsteps. Tell your neighbor, walk in his footsteps. It's literally as Jesus is walking, they would follow in his footsteps, right? Literally, but also figuratively. As disciples, we follow him in his footsteps. Luke 14:25-35. It's one of the instances that he talks to his disciples. So many of you are his disciples. Many of you follow him. And this is what Jesus would do. He would use this moment and have you question, is he worth it? You see, churches, pastors, we try to grow our churches. It's not a bad thing because we want people to know Jesus. But Jesus would also use times to ask them, you sure you want to continue to come? You sure you want to continue to follow me? Right? It's like me, that's what I should do, right? You sure you want to give your life to Jesus? You sure you want to come to this church? Because we'll talk about Jesus. That's what he's doing right here, Luke 14:25. Now great crowds accompanied him. So he was infamous at this time. And he turned and said to them, if anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters, and even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. Do you hear that? Whoever does not bear his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. For which of you, desiring to build a tower, does not first sit down and count the cost, whether he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, when he has laid a foundation and is not able to finish, all who see it begin to mock him, saying, "This man began to build, was not able to finish." He's taking a moment and really asking, is this what you want? Count the cost. Count the cost. Right after this, Jesus talks about war. Which nation or king would go into war and not first count the cost? How many men do I have? How much artillery do I have? Can I win this war? If I can't win this war, it's not going to be worth it. He counts the cost and backs off. What he is saying is, count the cost. Am I worth it? Is Christ worth it? I have a friend from youth group. For the most part, she did not know Christ. I would say maybe never really believed. Senior year, my senior year, her junior year, we go on a missions trip. I was surprised that she came. Went on a missions trip, and this was to Mexico. In the U.S., a bunch of different churches would send their youth groups and go into different cities in Mexico to do ministry. And we would do different work with children, with the poor in Mexico, and we're scattered throughout Mexico. At the end of our 2 weeks or so, or 3 weeks or so, we all came back together to share about our time. And it was about 200 or so youth from America in Mexico celebrating what God has done. But also, they give us a time to share, to do an open mic. And so, I'm thinking, who's going to share? 200, 300 people, we don't know anyone. Who's going to go up there and have the courage to share? This friend from my youth group stands up right away and goes straight to makes a beeline to the mic. And I'm surprised. We're all looking at each other like, what's going on? This girl's really excited. And goes to the mic and just shares about all that God has done. And she's just beaming, full of joy. She comes back. We're like, great job, high-fiving each other. I'm just amazed. Go back home to Chicago. A month later, in youth group, I don't see her. Wonder, what's going on? A couple of weeks later, I ask her brother, what's going on with your sister? She was so passionate. She's not interested anymore. What's going on? And I found out. She thought about it. She counted the cost. She thought about it because her parents are unbelievers. She thought about it. Can I believe in a God where if my parents don't believe, don't worship him, that they wouldn't go to heaven? Can I believe in that God? What does this passage say, right? If anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother and wife and children, and yes, even his own life, cannot be my disciple. This is not objective. It's not you should actually hate. It's comparative. It's subjective. The amount in which you love Christ, everything else falls drastically short. So I shared about my friend from youth group. I think about other people, even here at this church. There are people at our church, and I love it, because they've come to know Christ one day. And they see him as beautiful. But their family is unbelieving. Their family actually has a hard time with some of the Christians in their family. And they grow more distant. The Christian tries to love and honor them, but there's this animosity, this separation. What does that look like? To the parent, it looks like hate. To the parent, it looks like, yes, that the child, the Christian tries to honor, but that child is now a Christian, and their allegiance, their love is now to God. Yes, they still love their parents, but it looks like, hey, that's what it's saying. Count the cost. Is he worth it all? Is he absolutely worth it all? That's what Jesus is saying. Yes, if you come to me, I will heal you. If you come to me, yes, I will give you what you need. That's what he did. He gave to them their physical needs as a sign of their spiritual need and what he would ultimately do for them, die on the cross. Give them eternal, internal peace. And as they do that, they start to realize, following Jesus is not just health and wealth. Sometimes you give up health and wealth for Christ. You give up sometimes that job for Christ because you know that job is not good for you. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, a pastor from some time ago, says this: when Christ calls a man, he bids him come and die. That's Christianity. Come. It's a narrow path. On this path, it's bloodied. As you follow my footsteps, you'll see on the floor this line where I dragged the cross. If you follow me, you'll see the blood, you'll see the sweat, you'll see the tears. You'll see the mark of the cross. He says, if you follow me, that's the path to me. Follow me, for it's a narrow path. But as he says this, in Matthew 16, this is what he also says. If anyone would come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross and follow me. And whoever would save his life will lose it. If you try to save your life, you lose it. But whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. So the question is Christ worth it? Is Christ worth it? For the Christian, it's an absolute yes. For the Christian knows, though it feels like you're dying, you're actually finding life for the first time. Though it seems like it's a struggle, you start to realize, yes, it may be a struggle on the outside. There may be some persecution. There may be some people in your workplace that don't like you because of your faith and what you believe. But you realize that's worth the cost because you want to know Christ. Because you've experienced no greater love. You've found no greater person because you've met the one and true God. So the Christian says, absolutely, it is worth it. Because though it feels like you are dying, you start to realize, I have come to live. At the end of these verses, Jesus closes this section by saying, salt is good, but if salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? If it's no use either for the soil or for the manure pile, it is thrown away. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. What he is saying is this: the only way you will ever truly be light in this world, salt in this world, is when you're fully committed. If you're half-hearted, chances are people around you, they don't see the light. They see you claiming to be a Christian, but there's nothing attractive about your life. There's no light. There's no salt. What salt does, what it did is it preserved food. What salt did is it gave food flavor. Your life is supposed to preserve life, preserve this world by how you live. That's what it's saying. Is Christ worth it to you? The Christian says, absolutely, he is worth it. It is hard, but I know it's temporary, but he is worth it. You walk after him, you walk with him, you follow in his footsteps, and lastly, you walk till you see no more steps. You walk until you see no more steps. What do I mean? Luke 24:50. This is the very end of it all. Jesus has died, he is resurrected. He's appeared to his disciples, showing that he is the resurrected man, God. And it's in this moment, he tells them to go out into the nations, to tell everyone about what he has done. That's a great commission. And after that, this is what happens. Luke 24:50. Then he led them out as far as Bethany, and lifting up his hands, he blessed them. While he blessed them, he parted from them and was carried up into heaven. And they worshipped him and returned to Jerusalem with great joy and were continually in the temple blessing God. If you are a Christian, this is your destiny. You will die and resurrect, or one day Jesus will come back and you will meet him. But that's your destiny. And you're called to follow him until you die, or you're called to follow him until you come back. There is nothing else. There is no other option, because again, the Christian says he is worth it. I have seen him, I know him, I love him, and I will live my life after him. You run till the end. You run till the end. Now I'll just tell you, there are too many that don't finish the race. I think about friends from my youth group. I think about friends from college who were once passionate about Jesus. And they would at that time say, yes, Jesus is everything, he is worth it. But they get sidetracked. They may even still claim to be Christian, but their life doesn't show it. There's no light, there's no salt, because too many don't finish the race. This past summer, one of the best things about this past summer was I was able to do ministry with a friend of mine from youth group. She was a pastor's kid, and they've moved out to Korea. The father's still pastoring here in Korea. They called me out recently to do a retreat for them. So I went to do a retreat for their youth group. And one of the greatest things was to see my friend Joanna loving Jesus and serving the youth. To me, that was one of those most beautiful things, because we're 20 plus years separated from youth group. To see her now married and have a kid and loving Jesus and serving the church, to me, there is no greater blessing. My hope is this: if you come to our church, I will get to know you, I will pastor you, whatever you need, I will try to be there. But my hope is this, that I know for many of you, you're here short term. My hope is that 20 years later, 30 years later, maybe I run into you in the airport. Maybe I run into you in the streets, and we have a moment to catch up. My prayer is that you would say, I'm loving Jesus. He is worth it all. Life has been hard. I've gone through this, and this, but he is still worth it. He is still beautiful. That is my hope. Gandhi was not a Christian, but he admired Christ. So many friends would ask Gandhi, if you admire Christ so much, why don't you become a Christian? And Gandhi reportedly replied by saying, when I meet a Christian who's a follower of Christ, I may consider it. If Gandhi saw you, what would he say about your God that you follow? Around 200 years ago, there was a revival in Wales, England. In this revival, many missionaries came forth. And there was a pocket of missionaries that went to northeast India called Assam, India. And in this area, there was a lot of hostile tribesmen. Some of them were headhunters. For sport, they would headhunt. What I mean by that is not look for jobs for other people, not a headhunter in that way. But for sport, for fun, they would attack other tribes, kill them, decapitate them, and put their head on their spear. That's what they did. They were headhunters. These Welsh missionaries tried to minister to them and failed and failed and failed. Many of them losing their lives, many of them going back. One Welsh missionary was able to convert a man, his wife, and 2 children. And that man, wife, and children genuinely believed. They saw Jesus, and they realized who he was, that he is God, that he is beautiful, and that he came to save them. So he starts to tell all his other tribesmen, these warriors, about who this Jesus is. And he wouldn't stop. And when people would see that this man is different now, they would see it in his eyes, in his expressions, and how he lived, how he talked. So people in the tribe, slowly, one by one, start to become Christian. The tribe's leader hears about what's happening, comes down. What is this that's going on? Don't believe in Christ. He is not God. but they can't deny him. They feel his presence. They start to give their life to Christ. So the tribe's leader is enraged by what's happening. So he takes that family, that original family that became Christian. And he says, if you do not denounce Christ, I will execute your family. So he takes his children, pulls them aside, gets his warriors to get the arrows, and tells this man, if you do not deny Christ, I will arrow down your 2 children. So the man sees his children, loves them, but also knows that this is not the end if they die. So he looks at them, tells them he loves them, and tells the leader, I will not deny my Christ. The tribe's leader cues the arrowmen, arrows down the 2 children. They fall and they die. At this time, this man responds by saying this, I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back, no turning back. The chief tribesman tells him, now it's your wife. Brings his wife. If you do not deny Christ, your wife will be arrowed down. He looks at his wife, says, I can't deny my Lord. He is worth it all. Shoots down the wife. And that's when he says, though none go with me, still I will follow. No turning back, no turning back. And the chief says, I will give you one last attempt. If you do not renounce your faith here publicly, I will arrow you down. And that's when this man looks to heaven and says, the cross before me, the world behind me. No turning back, no turning back. At that moment, he was shot down and died. The tribesmen are saddened by what has happened. The leader looks around and looks at the father, the wife, the 2 children. And it hits him what has happened. That this man has given up the most precious thing for this God. And it's at that moment, this leader gives his life to Christ. And it's at that moment, those words were made into that song that many of you know. And he says this, I too belong to Jesus Christ. And he says he is truly worth it all. I ask you, is Christ worth it all? Because I know what Christ would say of us. Yes, they're sinners. Yes, they fall short. But I know what Christ would say. He would say they are worth it. Because I love them and I created them. I know God the Father would say they are worth it. I will send my Son. I will let him die in their place, for they are worth it. He would say you are worth it, not because we are inherently worthy, but because God is worthy, and because he is love, and because he is just, he has found a way to bring us back to himself. That we do not have to be ransomed, but Christ was ransomed on our behalf. That is the gospel. But also, not only would he say, are they worth it? What he would also say is, I, Christ, I am worth it. For I am God, and I am love, and I am holy, and I am just. And for them to spend an eternity apart from me is also unjust. So he would also say, yes, they are worthy because I love them, but I am worthy, and they need to know me. And that is the gospel. That is why if you deny him, he can't save you. But if you give your life to him, that's when he can come into your life and save you. And that is the invitation to you all. Let's pray.